It's one of those moments that'll haunt you forever. The moment when you dared to dream big, and instead of encouragement, you were met with laughter. I remember the day I told my family about my dreams, my vision for a life that was bigger than anything they could see. But instead of support, all I got were mocking smiles, jokes, and a cold reminder of how unrealistic my ambitions were. The words stung, but I stayed calm. Deep down, I made a promise to myself. I would make them regret laughing at me. At the time, I was stuck in a job I hated, dragging myself through every day just to survive. My family, who was supposed to be my support system, was the last place I could turn to. They couldn't understand why I wanted something more. All they could see was that I wasn't content with the life they had built for themselves, and I was a dreamer, the one who needed to get real. But that moment of isolation, that moment when the people I loved the most dismissed my dreams as if they were nothing more than fantasies, that's when the fire inside me was ignited. And now? Well, now they are begging me for help. It would have been so easy to explode. The words they threw at me, the mocking laughter, the dismissive glances, they cut deep. I could feel my chest tightening, my heartbeat quickening, and my hands trembling with the anger I wanted to unleash. But something inside me held me back. The last thing I wanted was to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my composure. So I stood there, silent, still. I took a slow, deliberate breath, reminding myself that losing control would only prove them right. It wasn't anger I needed. It was resolve. If they couldn't see my worth now, it didn't matter. I didn't need their approval to chase my dreams. What mattered was that I believed in myself, even when no one else did. They had laughed as I laid out my plans, the plans that meant everything to me. My words, my ambitions, were met with nothing but mockery, but I refused to show the hurt. My mom had tried to stifle a laugh, while my dad exchanged a look with my uncle, a look that said, "We're worried about you, but we don't know how to tell you." My cousin rolled his eyes, barely hiding his disbelief, and the rest of the family simply sat there, unsure whether they should offer a word of support or just let the awkwardness hang in the air like a thick fog. But I didn't flinch. I didn't let them see my frustration. "I understand," I said quietly, my voice steady but not without a hint of quiet power. "But I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you that this is something I'm going to do. Whether you believe in me or not doesn't change anything." It wasn't a declaration of anger, nor was it an attempt to prove myself in that moment. It was simply the truth. It was a moment I realized that this journey, this path to success, was mine alone to walk. It didn't matter how much they laughed, how many doubts they voiced, or how many times they told me that dreams like mine were reserved for people who got lucky. I wasn't going to quit, no matter how heavy the weight of their disbelief became. What they didn't understand was that their laughter wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. Every chuckle, every dismissive comment, every sigh of disappointment, they were just fuel to the fire I was going to build. As I stood there in that room, surrounded by the people I loved the most, I promised myself one thing. I would make it. Not just for me, but for them. I would succeed, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I had the strength to keep going, no matter how hard the road ahead was. They wanted me to settle, to follow the path of least resistance, the one they had chosen for themselves. But that wasn't my story. I couldn't live their life, and they couldn't live mine. So, instead of retaliating with words, I chose to internalize the rejection and keep moving forward. I left that day with a quiet fire burning in my chest, my resolve stronger than ever. The world had already dismissed me, but I wouldn't allow my family's disbelief to be the final chapter in my story. The truth was simple. I didn't need their permission. I only needed my own belief. I needed to know that I was capable of greatness, even when it felt like everything was stacked against me. I walked away that day not with anger, but with determination. And from that moment on, I made a vow to myself I would never stop. I would keep pushing, even if it meant walking this journey alone at first. The years ahead wouldn't be easy, but if there was one thing I was sure of, it was that no amount of laughter, mockery, or doubt could stand in the way of a person who was ready to fight for their dreams. And from that day on, I was ready to fight. The days that followed that encounter with my family were filled with quiet determination. I didn't talk about my plans anymore. I didn't share my ideas, my dreams, or my vision with anyone else. Not because I was scared or uncertain, but because I knew what they would say. I had already heard their doubts, their ridicule, and now, the only person I needed to impress was myself. My dreams had become too precious to be shared with those who couldn't see their value. I spent the next few months in relative silence, choosing to keep my ambitions close to my chest. It wasn't that I was trying to keep secrets. It was more about being strategic. I knew that words without action were meaningless. So, I made the decision to focus on actions, letting them speak for me when the time came. I began by learning everything I could about the business I wanted to build. It wasn't a sudden burst of inspiration or some flash of genius that led me here. It was steady, consistent effort. I had no grand illusions that success would come easily or quickly. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but I was prepared. I didn't need to have all the answers right away. I just needed to take the first step and then the next. And soon enough, those steps would add up. In the beginning, it was all about acquiring knowledge. I signed up for online courses, read every book I could get my hands on, and absorbed as much information as I could about the industry I wanted to break into. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential. I spent countless hours in my small apartment, reading, researching, and honing my skills. Each day, I learned something new, something that would bring me closer to my goal. But it wasn't just about the technical skills or the theoretical knowledge. It was also about building a foundation for my business. I knew I couldn't do it alone. Networking became just as important as learning the craft. I started reaching out to people in the field, finding mentors, and connecting with like-minded individuals who shared my vision. Some conversations went nowhere, while others sparked the beginnings of partnerships and collaborations. I didn't push for anything too soon, but I was always careful to lay the groundwork for something bigger. Slowly, I began to build my network, not with the intention of showing off or impressing others, but because I understood the power of relationships. It was a quiet, steady process of cultivating connections that would prove valuable later on. I didn't need to announce my ambitions to the world. I just needed to surround myself with people who could help me get there. At the same time, I started working on the practical side of things. I needed money to fuel my dream, and I didn't have much. So, I took on freelance gigs, small jobs that didn't pay a lot but allowed me to build a portfolio. At first, it felt like I was barely scraping by, but every project was a stepping stone. Every successful completion was proof that I could do it. It wasn't about the paycheck. It was about the experience, the skill building, and most importantly, the confidence I was gaining in myself. During this time, I kept my personal life low-key. I wasn't hanging out with friends, wasn't attending family gatherings, and certainly wasn't boasting about the progress I was making. I knew better than to announce something I wasn't yet ready to fully reveal. I needed to work in silence, to craft my success behind closed doors so that when the time came, I could show everyone, not with words, but with results. My family, they were still unaware of the progress I was making, and I didn't mind. I was no longer looking for their validation. The more I focused on building my future, the more I realized that I didn't need anyone's permission to succeed. In fact, I began to feel a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that I was doing this entirely on my own. The path ahead was mine to walk, and I was no longer waiting for anyone to catch up with me. There were days when the pressure felt overwhelming, when the doubt crept in, and I wondered if it would ever pay off. But those moments were brief, fleeting. I reminded myself that success wasn't instant. It took time. It took patience. And most of all, it took consistency. Every step I took, no matter how small, was a step closer to the life I wanted. And that was enough to keep me moving forward. Eventually, I began to see the fruits of my labor. My freelance work started to pick up, and the projects I took on grew more significant. I didn't need a huge audience or a grand platform to start. Small, steady progress was enough. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I found myself in a position where I was no longer just dreaming. I was doing. I had developed a system, a rhythm to my work. I didn't let distractions sway me, and I kept my eyes fixed on the bigger picture. Every time I faced a setback, I saw it as an opportunity to learn and grow, not as a reason to quit. I learned to treat failures as lessons, stepping stones that helped me navigate the path toward success. By the time I felt ready to share my progress with the world, my foundation was solid. I had built my skills, my network, and my reputation from the ground up. I wasn't some overnight success story. I had put in the work, the long nights, the countless hours of practice, the rejection, and the doubt. And in that silence, I had built something real. It was in this quiet progress, away from the eyes of the world, that my dream began to take shape. And when the time came for me to reveal it, I was ready, not just with a product, but with a confidence that I could make it. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already done the hard work. The world would have to catch up. The day my success became undeniable, I felt something strange stir inside me. It wasn't excitement or pride, although both were there. No, it was more like a quiet satisfaction, a calm sense of closure, knowing that all the months of hard work, the nights of self-doubt, and the sacrifices had finally paid off. I had done it. I had built something real, something that could no longer be dismissed or laughed at. It wasn't the kind of success that shouted or boasted. It was a kind that spoke for itself, effortlessly commanding attention without needing to draw it. It all came together in a moment that was so ordinary it almost felt anticlimactic. I had just wrapped up a high-profile deal with a client, an accomplishment that put me on the map in the industry. The numbers spoke for themselves, and my business was thriving. People were now coming to me, not the other way around. I had cultivated a reputation that was no longer just a dream, and suddenly I was in a position to change everything. But I didn't run to my family with this news. I didn't rush home to shout it from the rooftops, to rub their faces in the laughter they had thrown at me so many years ago. That wasn't my style. No, I knew better now. Revenge wasn't about making a scene or confronting them with anger. It was about quietly showing them that I had surpassed everything they thought was impossible for me. I waited. I watched, and I noticed that, just as I had once been, my family was struggling. My mom was working overtime at her job, my dad was buried under debt, and my cousins were trapped in careers that no longer fulfilled them. They weren't doing badly. They were simply stagnant, stuck in a life they had accepted, but not chosen. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who had mocked my dreams were now facing the reality that they had long been afraid to pursue their own. I knew it was time. It wasn't out of malice or desire to rub my success in their faces. It was simply the right moment to show them, quietly, without fanfare, that I had moved past their expectations. I had built something real, something they couldn't ignore. But I didn't flaunt it. I didn't walk in with a smug smile or a pointed remark. Instead, I offered help. It started with small things, an offer to help my mom with her bills, an introduction to someone who could help my dad's business, a suggestion to one of my cousins about a potential career move they hadn't considered. I didn't do it in an arrogant way. I didn't say, "Look at me now." I simply made the offers because I knew that, if they accepted, they would see the success they had once laughed at wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. I had reached a point where I could help, and I didn't need anything in return. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a look at how far I've come moment. It was a controlled, deliberate move to show them that I had reached a place where I no longer needed their approval, nor did I need to prove anything to them. I was offering them help, not out of charity, but out of the understanding that I had earned this place, and I could now extend a hand without seeking validation. The first time I extended an olive branch, it was to my mom. I had noticed she was struggling with bills, and rather than say anything about her work schedule, I just offered to help her with one of her larger payments. Her eyes widened, and she hesitated, not sure if she should accept. "I can't just take your money," she said quietly, her pride evident. I smiled. "Mom, it's not about charity. It's about showing you that I'm here for you, and you've been here for me when I needed you. Let me help." It wasn't an emotional moment. It didn't need to be. The simple act of offering to help was enough. My success didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to be flaunted. The quiet way I was changing their lives, without asking for anything in return, was enough to prove that I had made it, that the dreams they once laughed at were now a reality. And they didn't have to admit they were wrong. They didn't have to say a word. But I knew they had to feel it. As I continued to extend small but meaningful gestures of help to my family, I watched their lives change, bit by bit. It wasn't as if everything suddenly fell into place, but the impact was undeniable. My dad started seeing his business grow after I connected him with some potential partners. One of my cousins landed a job with a company I had connections to, and my mom, for the first time in years, didn't have to worry about her finances as much. Slowly but surely, I began to see them shift, and it was then that I realized the success I had fought for wasn't just about proving my worth to them. It was about lifting us all up. The most important realization came when they no longer saw me as a dreamer they once laughed at. I had crossed the threshold. I was no longer seeking their approval. I didn't need them to validate my success. I had achieved it on my own, and in the process, I had created something bigger than what they ever could have imagined. They didn't need to admit they were wrong. It didn't matter. The reality was right in front of them. I hadn't just succeeded in building a business. I had proven that I could rise above the limitations they had imposed on me. And now, I was able to give back, not out of a sense of revenge, but out of a sense of justice. I had earned my success, and I had made sure that my family was included in the fruits of that success. It was a quiet, satisfying closure to the story that had started with so much doubt. They could no longer deny what I had achieved. But more than that, they saw that I was not bitter, nor was I holding their mockery against them. I wasn't looking for an apology. I didn't need one. The fact that I could now help them was the best proof I could offer. It was a final, silent victory that no words could ever explain. And as I stood there, watching my family begin to change, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't the final goal. The real satisfaction came in knowing that I had made it, that I had proven my worth, not to them, but to myself. I had done it, and now I could give back in a way that wasn't tainted by bitterness or resentment. The past didn't define me anymore. The future was mine to shape. So I smiled quietly and kept going, because the journey wasn't over yet. And my success, it was just beginning. Looking back on everything, the laughter, the doubt, the silence, and eventually the quiet success, I realized how much I've changed. The road wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it. But the one thing I learned throughout this journey is that success doesn't come from seeking validation or trying to prove others wrong. It comes from trusting yourself, even when the world doesn't. For so long, I thought my success would be a way to show them I was right. But as I stand here today, I see it differently. The real victory wasn't in making them see me. It was in making myself believe in me. I learned that our true power lies in our ability to keep moving forward, to grow, to trust our instincts, and to take the steps toward fulfilling our own potential, regardless of the doubts and negativity we face along the way. Sometimes the people who doubt you are the ones who end up needing you the most. Keep chasing your dreams, even when others don't see the vision. It's your future, not theirs. Remember, no matter how impossible it may seem, your dreams are yours to chase. The world may laugh, they may question, and they may doubt, but at the end of the day, it's your passion, your hard work, and your vision that will shape your future. Stay focused, stay determined, and keep pushing forward. Don't let anyone else's opinion stop you from reaching your goals. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced doubt from the people closest to you? How did you overcome it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Your journey matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Keep dreaming big.